So I was browsing LinkedIn the other day looking for cringe posts about CEOs who treat their cleaners like human beings and seek for recognition on social media. And one of my connections shared this article about decentralized identity. Obviously, his post was extremely positive about the idea, and he talked about Angela Merkel as a brave woman or something along the lines there. And I'm just sitting there saying, what the hell is wrong with you, boy? Of course, I kept my thoughts to myself, because saying something like that on LinkedIn is a career suicide. And there's some consensus that IT specialists are more intelligent than the general population, but who else is going to pat themselves on the shoulder for implementing such a satanic system? So this article is in German, and I used Google Translate to change it to English. Now let's read what it says. Secure electronic identification, both for the use of government services and private offers. So all of your documents will be digital and in control of your government, whether it's your driving license or your bank account credit. Today, together with companies, Chancellor Merkel gave the go-ahead for the consolidation and scaling of the ecosystem of digital identities. All of this information is going to be saved in a government database, and we all know how secured are those databases. Since the go-ahead in December 2020, the federal government has been working in an interministerial project group in close cooperation with business partners on the implementation of an ecosystem of digital identities based on the approach of a self-sovereign identity. This is intended to enable citizens to digitally manage and independently share any type of state and privately issued evidence. A user-friendly electronic identification also counts here, which allows the use of state services as well as numerous other functions, access to park sharing, parking stations, and thus goes well beyond the application possibilities of the new identity card at the same time, but based on this. Germany is divided to 16 states, and this policy is implemented by the federal government, which is a bit like the White House in the USA. Self-sovereign identity means a user has control over its credentials, and of course they have to mention how good it is. It's user-friendly, it's efficient. My guess is they're going to bribe the first people who get it. Maybe they will sponsor social media influencers to advertise it, and after that they will force people to get it, and it will become mandatory at some point. Market launch after successful test operation. In May, after just 4 months of development, the go-ahead for the ecosystem of digital identities was given with an initial pilot project. Since the second meeting with the Chancellor in May, everyone involved has been working flat out on other use cases. While the hotel check-in was a test case with a deliberately small number of users, the new use cases that will go live in the next few months are real market launches for end customers. This includes registration for prepaid contracts, company access management for employees, driver's license checks for fleet management, registration for e-commerce, and online account or custody account opening at banks. This section mentions that there were 4 months of development so far. I don't believe it because we've heard of ID 2020 years ago. A use case, by the way, is an example for how the product will be used in practice. And they give all these use cases in the end of the section. So contracts, driver's license checks, trading stocks or currency over the internet, bank accounts. The digitalization of these processes gives your government a lot more control over you, and they have to do it before they implement a social credit score system. Secure digital wallet with new technology. These digital applications are made possible with a specially developed wallet app. The digital wallet, developed in cooperation with the private sector, uses the new technology self-sovereign identity. It enables every citizen to control their own data and to share it independently. This is to ensure a high standard of confidentiality and decentralization. This is also important as almost every proof of identity should be displayed in the wallet. From identity cards to driver's licenses to birth certificates. These digital certificates should be just as useful when applying for administrative services as they are for private activities on the internet. Once again, they have to present it as a positive development so people will want it. I guess that you will have to carry this identity with you, or that it will be part of your body in some way. Every figure of authority will be able to ask you to show this identity to them, or they will be able to scan you from far away. The federal government sees the lack of digital evidence as one of the most pressing obstacles to digitalization of our time. I bet they do. The digital identity ecosystem is intended to leverage great economic potential and also to strengthen Germany's digital sovereignty together with European partners in the long term. How an ecosystem of digital identities can contribute to a self-determined and at the same time user-friendly handling of the digital self you can read in the white paper Digital Identity. So they have a link to this article about digital identity. Personally, I'm not going to waste time on this Bolshevik propaganda. Let's move on. Great interest at European level. The ecosystem of digital identities also sees itself as an alternative to private ID offers from providers outside Europe. At the European level, the momentum on the topic of digital identities is therefore unbroken, says Federal CIO Markus Richter. He sees Germany as a pioneer in this development. He considers the technology behind the wallet app to be trend-setting. The federal government is in talks with the European Commission and the member states. A joint declaration on cooperation with Spain in building an ecosystem of digital identities across borders was signed in July. The signing of such a declaration is imminent with presumably at least one other European partner. This is the foot in the door. Once they implement the digital identity in Germany, it's just a matter of time until it continues to take over the rest of the continent. Create long-term perspective. The close cooperation between the state and business in development of the ecosystem of digital identities was the key to the success achieved so far. But how can the joint work be continued successfully? The federal government discussed this question and various proposals together with the business representatives involved. All those involved agree on the necessity of perpetuating the joint efforts on the Grown project, a development and operator organization jointly supported by the state and business is intended to create long-term prospects, planning security and a stable division of tasks in the medium and long term. The Chancellor is convinced that a joint venture between the state and business in this form is the right way to put the ecosystem on a sustainable footing in the long term. Following your exchange with representatives of the economy on September 16, a joint declaration of intent, letter of intent, is to be drawn up, the key points of which are already available and were also the subject of the discussion. What happens when corporations and government work together is that government representatives are guaranteed a position in the corporation in exchange for something, so you can bet that they don't represent your interests. Digital technologies are changing the lives of all of us. How should Europe's digital future be shaped? How can new technologies be made usable for people? Citizens are invited to take part in a Europe-wide dialogue process, the Conference on the Future of Europe. Get involved with your ideas, visions, or even your own events. You can find more information on our topic page. Some more of the Bolshevik propaganda. This article is from the 16th of September and somehow it slipped under the radar. Personally, I think that the injections are already old news and this is what we should talk about. Germany is the strongest economic force in Europe, so if this idea is implemented there, it's going to take over the entire continent. After that happens, they can start rewarding people for snitching on their neighbors. By then it will be almost impossible to reverse the process.